Update, brought to you by Simcox Advocates, advising businesses and families since 1949. Visit simcox.com or call 690 300. Manx Radio's Update with Andy Wint.
First of May, good evening, it's 5:30. This is Update for Wednesday, 19th of July, 2023 from Manx Radio. 30 minutes to look at the latest news on the Isle of Man. A background to that news and sport, business, Sea-Watch, travel updates, and the newsmakers in person this evening. Russian MHK is happy for a wind farm in the south. Almost 400 patients have been prescribed cannabis. The meat plant refutes the no meat claim. The latest on the Ranson tribunal. And FC Isle of Man can cope with financial challenges. Owen whisper it. No problems at Ronaldsway tonight.
Man Benham for all your business and legal needs.
First of all, at 29 minutes ahead of 6 o'clock, the Update News headlines. Fast to my Dave Moore.
Fast to my. A Douglas man who beat his daughter with a slipper and a belt before forcing her to kneel in punishment will be sentenced in September. The defendant, who can't be named for legal reasons, admitted willfully assaulting his child between the 1st and 22nd of December last year. A Russian MHK is welcoming Manx Utilities' proposals for onshore wind farms. 2 sites have been identified as possible locations for turbines to be built, one of which falls within Michelle Haywood's constituency. The rider and spectator who were injured in last week's accident during the Southern 100 road races are currently recovering in UK hospitals. In a statement, the organisers of the event say the pair, who remain unnamed, both received leg injuries in the crash which claimed the lives of competitor Alan Connor and Marshal Liam Clark. Further afield, and the UK Prime Minister thinks a bigger than expected fall in inflation is evidence his plan is working. Falling fuel prices have driven the slowdown in inflation to 7.9% in the year to June. That compares to 8.7% a month earlier. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak insists it wasn't just the promise of subsidies and taxpayers' money which persuaded Tata and its Jaguar Land Rover firm to build its new battery plant in the UK. It'll employ 4,000 people when it opens in 2026. There's been an apology from the UK Defence Secretary on behalf of the country to LGBT plus people in the military. A review has been looking into their historical mistreatment in the armed forces. Those are the Update News headlines. The next bulletin is at 6.
Man Benham. Contact us by phone, video call, email or face-to-face. We're happy to connect with you. Manx Radio Weather with Manx Glass and Glazing.
Goromaya, thank you, Dave. From the Ronaldsway Met Office, there's no wind warning in operation for the North Irish Sea. State of sea is slight, and the 3-day weather this evening, some late sunshine, a moderate northwest wind, and a dry night, and down to 12 degrees Celsius. For Jordan, Thursday, dry with sunny intervals, a light mainly northwesterly, top temperature 18, down to 12 through the night into Chehenya, and Friday, showers first thing, then dry for much of the day and up to 17. Rain coming in overnight for a wet Saturday. Tide still on the way out. Low waters 25 past 7, sunset 21 minutes to 10, high tide 25 to 2 a.m, sunrise 11 minutes past 5, and the morning low water 13 minutes past 8.
Visit the Manx Glass and Glazing website and see a range of products from windows to doors, mirrors to splashbacks. manxglass.com.
Plans for onshore wind farms are being welcomed by a southern MHK. The wind farms are in the south. You'll hear views from some locals resident in the north of the island shortly, but first of all, here's the MHK, Michelle Haywood, who thinks the project will be the ticket to cheaper electricity in the long run.
There is part of me that thinks, there's something nice about looking up at it. I see them when I travel, and I always look at them and I think there's a community that's made a commitment to not burning fossil fuels, and there's a community that's made a commitment to the future. And so I don't see them as a scary thing. They are effectively a relatively temporary structure. It's not like I'm saying let's dynamite the top of South Brule and flatten it forever and it'll be gone. It's a structure put up to serve a purpose, but I actually think there's something inspiring about the site of wind turbines that says this is a community that's moving on. If we'd moved to wind farms years ago, we'd have the cheap electricity now. The fact that we're tied into fossil fuels and we're tied into a global price that we've got no control over is our downfall at the moment, and that's why costs are so high. I understand that everyone wants to have everything cheap. You can't change things without putting some money into them, and that will have to happen. As to whether whether sites who were, I know that there were constraints around what the MUA put it was going to be on government-owned land or government-owned buildings for the solar, so that there was no issues over land ownership or people capitalising on selling land because the government had said they wanted it. So that wasn't going to push costs up anymore. The work that's been done about the number of turbines, Eriestone's one of those sites that actually we can get away with fewer turbines down there because the wind quality is so good, and it's pretty much sort of funneled in that direction.
Wind farms and solar are okay as far as they go, but they're not the answer to everything. Why is no one talking about hydro?
It's ridiculous. It's just a joke. We don't want none of this. Wind farms all over the place. It's bad enough from plonking them down in the sea.
They're an eyesore, but they do generate the electricity. The biggest problem with that is collecting the electricity that it does, being able to manage it with the high winds that are around.
The Isle of Man meat plants moved to refute claims there was no meat processed at the facility last week. The story from Dave Moore.
I've reason to believe last week no beef was processed in the Isle of Man meat plant. However, I'm sure much was imported on the steam packet, and much of this would have been used in many government buildings.
There are lots of reasons why producers choose not to send animals to the meat plant, some of them choosing to export them off island, and it tends to be a bit of an ebb and flow about the different days on which animals are processed there.
That was Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture member Michelle Haywood responding to a question in Junior Tynwald from Castle Rushen High School student Eben Gelling, as reported on Manx Radio. It prompted this response from Isle of Man Meats, who state that last week they processed over 20 tonnes of locally reared cattle, sheep and pigs. They go on to say that managing supply and demand is one of the major challenges they face and something they constantly review. There'll be times when they have surplus stock and have to use export channels to ensure their farmers get the return they need, but their priority is always to meet local market demands wherever possible. Meanwhile, Dr Haywood, in an interview with Manx Radio's political correspondent Phil Gaughan, added a further statement.
So there has been an issue with a machine part that has now been repaired, and animals are being processed today. So I'm comfortable that we're back on track, but it's certainly a matter of frustration that we lost that time, especially when we've had delays with intake. But I know that the managing director is certainly looking at how we can build resilience so that we don't have situations like that happen again. But sometimes things happen and they're just outside of the control of anyone.
Update brought to you by Simcox Advocates, advising businesses and families since 1949. Visit simcox.com or call 690 300.
The Select Committee formed as part of a review into the Manx Government's handling of the Dr Rosalind Ranson Tribunal presented a series of recommendations to Tynwald Court today. Here's Siobhan Fletcher.
In presenting the committee's recommendations to the court, Garth MHK Daphne Kane named Richard Wright KC as the independent advisor who will oversee the review. Tynwald then unanimously approved the terms of reference for the review going forward. Among its recommendations, the committee called for all government departments, boards and offices to give full cooperation to the review. It also asked for legal privilege to be waived, an issue that was a subject of one of two High Court appeals relating to the tribunal. The review will be entirely independent of Tynwald and government in order to allow Mr Wright to consider events prior to April 2021, when Dr Ranson filed her grievance with the tribunal. Mr Wright will be required to produce a factual narrative of government's decision-making, including whether litigation was conducted appropriately and in good faith, and whether false or misleading documents were submitted to the tribunal. He will be able to liaise with Kate Brunner KC, who is heading up the previously established Isle of Man COVID review, as there's likely to be overlap between the two, and a report must be submitted to the Tynwald Register of Business by the end of January next year.
FC Isle of Man's chairman insists the club can cope with the financial challenges of their upcoming new season in the NWCFL Premier Division, which starts at the end of the month. Jill Christian says they've learned lessons from a turbulent last campaign, amidst there were worries about the Ravens' financial status at one stage.
Serious concerns, yeah. I genuinely thought for at least 6 weeks or so that we may not have a club into the next season, and whether we would even be able to finish the campaign, which no one wanted. We carried out a lot of work, the board liaising with government sponsors, etc. New personnel came in. We started plugging merchandise, more Golden Goal raffles, doing some fundraisers at the Pinewood, etc. And the team really mucked in and raised a significant amount, which was what we needed. We are going into the season a lot more positive, but we lost again. We lost money this season, which is something that we've got to keep addressing, because that obviously can't continue. I think one of the concerns last season was that members and season tickets didn't necessarily get value for money, and I think that's where we didn't quite get the prices right. And we've addressed that by giving the maximum increase that we're allowed within the league restrictions of 15% discount, but also to make sure that if you've got a season ticket you get a number of games free and that there is a discount. So we just, within the restrictions that we can, we've done our best.
Last season there was one big change, a change in management. Chris Bass was relieved of his duties, and in comes Paul Jones. Given the controversy that some people felt it was, have you ever had any time to reflect? Would you do things differently?
Of course I'd do things differently. I think everyone involved in the decision would do things differently. There's definitely regrets. I think it was a very difficult time for his family, and actually for myself and other members of the club as well.
Sea Watch with the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company.
The motor ship Ben McCree departed Heysham at 2:25. She'll be into Douglas in the next 20 minutes or so, onto the link span, departing this evening at 7:45 into Heysham at 11:30. The overnight departure 2:15, back to Douglas at 6 tomorrow morning. High-speed craft Manannan departed Douglas at 13 minutes to 3. She's on the link span in Liverpool right now, just below the Liver building. Will be departing at 7:15 this evening, back to Douglas at 10. Tomorrow morning's departure, 7:15 Manannan to Liverpool, 8:45 Ben McCree to Heysham.
Like the Steam Packet on Facebook for the latest sailing information.
The Chief Minister insists issuing an apology 50 years on for failings in the Summerland tragedy is being done at the right time. Alfred Cannon, MHK, thinks for the first time he's been able to understand the enormity of the grief that followed.
I think one of the things that has happened to me now over the last 3 months or so is that because of the forthcoming anniversary, because of the poignancy of the moment, for the first time really, I've had a chance to speak very openly and honestly with a couple of the survivors from that night, people who've suffered immense trauma. I've spoken also to a member of the emergency services, and it was a huge time clearly for everybody on the island. And I think what's happened, because I've been asked, do you think the island has failed in the past to sort of address this? And I think these are very difficult things for people to deal with, and I don't think it's something that's ever been lost from the consciousness of the island. But sometimes, people just don't really want to speak about such a tragedy and an incident which incurred so much suffering. And listen, not everybody will want to do so at this 50th anniversary, but I had to have made the decision along with council and others that now is the right time to offer an apology for the failings that were identified in the Commission of Inquiry's report at the time, even though the Commission didn't specifically point any fingers and effectively said there were no villains.
Were UK MPs right to be raising this issue in the United Kingdom Parliament?
It was maybe a little bit unnecessary to have brought it to a public debate, but it was a very short debate, and we were already taking the necessary actions, I think, to make sure that the occasion was marked properly and respectfully.
Manx Radio Business Briefing.
16 minutes now before 6. In corporate news, the Bristol-based financial service company Hargreaves Lansdown was in the black after reporting a jump in fourth quarter net new business and assets under administration. And for a full daily market report, go to ramseycrockhall.com. Youth unemployment in China has hit a new record high as the country's post-pandemic recovery falters. Official figures show the jobless rate of 16 to 24-year-olds in urban areas rose to 21.3% last month. This comes as the world's second-largest economy grew just 0.8% in the 3 months to the end of June. Analysts say the weak pace of growth has raised expectations that authorities may soon announce new measures to boost the economy. China's National Bureau of Statistics said that the data showed a good momentum of recovery. According to official figures released this week, the Chinese economy grew by 6.3% in the second quarter on an annual basis. It outstripped growth in the first quarter but missed analysts' expectations.
The Stock Market Report, brought to you by Ramsey Crookall.
UK and European stocks closed higher after UK inflation came in cooler than expected. US stocks opened higher. Global oil benchmark Brent briefly hovered above $80 per barrel. Gold steadied near an 8-week high. And the numbers now from Ramsey Crookall. At the close in London, the FTSE 100 up 1.8% at 7,588. The DAX in Frankfurt closed down 0.1% at 16,108. A short time ago in New York City, the Dow Jones Industrial up 0.4% at 35,109. The Nasdaq Tech Stocks Index up 0.4% at 14,114. And in Chicago, just a wee while ago, the S&P 500 up 0.4% at 4,572. In the exchange markets, the British pound sterling is trading at $1 28.9 cents, €1 15.1 cents, and 23 South African rand 11.6 cents. And finally, in commodities, gold's down 0.2% at $1,974 per troy ounce, and a barrel of Brent crude up 0.4% at $80.09.
You've got an investment plan?
Yeah, Mike set it up.
But don't you need loads of money to do that?
Not this one. It's called Shearwater from Ramsey Crookall, and you pay in monthly as little as £100. So it's like saving regularly, really helping us invest in the future for a house or the kids' education.
£100 a month? I could easily do that.
You should. The sooner you start, the better.
Invest in your future with as little as £100 a month. Shearwater from Ramsey Crookall, the island's investment specialist for 75 years. Call 717171 or visit ramseycrookall.com. Licensed and regulated by the Isle of Man Financial Services Authority.
The Isle of Man in 30 minutes. Update on Manx Radio with Andy Wint.
Faster, my good evening. It's 13 minutes before 6. A Douglas man who beat his daughter with a slipper and a belt before forcing her to kneel in punishment will be sentenced in September. The story from Tessa Hawley.
The defendant, who can't be named for legal reasons, admitted willfully assaulting his child between the 1st and the 22nd of December last year. He'd previously denied the offence and had been due to stand trial in October, but was rearranged at Douglas Courthouse and changed his plea. The prosecutor told the court the man had hit the teenager with various items, struck her with his fist and the palm of his hand, and banged her head against a wall repeatedly. He also made her kneel in a praying position and told her, "What have I done to deserve such a horrible daughter?" She suffered injuries to her knuckles, wrists, face, knees and shins. Messages that were sent in a family WhatsApp group to his daughter were said to be controlling and included threats to pull her out of school. The court heard the teen had referred the matter to the Department of Health and Social Care herself and is now in foster care. Her father was arrested and told police officers his daughter was a compulsive liar who was not appropriately managing a medical condition and was making allegations against him as she didn't want to be homeschooled. A social inquiry report has been requested before the man is sentenced on the 26th of September. Bail was granted until that date, with High Bailiff Jane Hughes warning him all sentencing options are open to the court, including custody. The man's wife, who had been charged with assaulting their daughter between the same dates, also appeared at Douglas Courthouse. The prosecutor offered no evidence and the charge against her was dismissed.
Manx Radio Sport.
Faster my Rob Pritchard.
Faster my, good evening. The Southern 100 Club has issued an update regarding 3 riders and a spectator who were injured during this year's Southern 100 road races. The organisation says David McConaughey, who was injured during the session on Monday, the 10th of July, has now been discharged from hospital after sustaining hip and leg injuries. Meanwhile, Joshua Potts, who was involved in a separate incident on the same day, has also been discharged from hospital after suffering tibia and fibula injuries. Elsewhere, the rider involved in the serious incident on the evening of Tuesday, the 11th of July, has been transferred to a hospital near to his home with ankle injuries. The spectator indirectly involved in that same incident is now receiving treatment for knee and leg injuries at a UK hospital. The Southern 100 Club is again thanking medics, marshals, officials and members of the public who assisted in the aftermath of Tuesday's incident, which claimed the life of rider Alan Connor and Marshal Liam Clark and resulted in the rest of the meeting being cancelled. And in golf, Manx golfer Anna Dawson is set to compete for one of the biggest purses of her career so far on the Ladies European Tour this week. From tomorrow, Dawson will take part in the La Sella Open in Alicante in Spain, which will then run until Sunday, with all players competing for a share of the total prize money in the region of €1 million. Elsewhere, it's been a mixed set of results for fellow Manx player Tom Gandy, who's recently taken part in a double-header on both the Challenge and Clutch Tours. Across Monday and Tuesday this week, Gandy took part in the latest Clutch Tour outing at Northants, where he put in a positive display over the 2 days to finish tied in 24th place with rounds of 66 and 72. It was a tougher competition, however, before then on Sunday during the Bank Open in Austria on the Challenge Tour. After a steady round of 69 on the opening day, a difficult score of 74 on the second meant he missed the cut for the remaining 2 days of the event. The Douglas man will return to action from the 25th to the 27th of July on the Clutch Pro Tour at Asbury.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Next inbound at Ronaldsway is the 5 to 8 Loganair from Liverpool on time, the 8:30 Loganair from London City and the 25 to 9 EasyJet from Gatwick, all showing on time, outbound tonight. The 6 o'clock Loganair to Liverpool, the 9:05 EasyJet back to Gatwick, showing on time. Gravel roads closed between Harbour Road and Fairway Close for gas upgrade work in Onken. Garth Road between Tossaby Road and the Foxdale Road is closed for bridge replacement work. South Quay and Peel's closed between the House of Manannan and the Road Bridge, and the Ballymena Road in Jerby's got phase closures for water main replacement. In Douglas, temporary lights 24 hours a day on Victoria Road at the Falconcliffe Terrace Junction for water main work. Packhorse Lane, Baldrine's closed for resurfacing. Temporary lights on the Coast Road between Laxey and Bulgham for overhead line work. Port Cornet Road in Glenmona is closed for emergency road repairs, and there are temporary lights on the new Castletown Road between Santon Motel for some patching work. And look out this weekend, the Grand Fondo is on Saturday and Sunday with various road closures for the cycling event. Go to grandfondoislaman.com for all the details.
H&H Motorcycles.im for all your motorcycle requirements. Southgate Industrial Estate, opposite Quayside Tyres. Call 665646.
Almost 400 patients have been prescribed cannabis since an island pharmacy started dispensing the drug. That story from Sean Cowper.
The pilot service got underway in December last year, with Carson's Pharmacy in Onken having been granted a licence to dispense cannabis products. From the start of the service to February this year, 455 prescriptions were dispensed to 148 patients. Between March and May, the number rose to 874 prescriptions and 335 patients. In total, 395 patients have received prescriptions since the pilot began, with some having been prescribed cannabis products in both periods. The figures have been published in response to a written Tynwald question from Speaker of the House of Keys, Ewan Watterson. Currently, the drug is only available to patients paying for a private prescription and not on the NHS. A broader review of the cannabis-based products for medicinal use service is scheduled for next month, but the Department of Health and Social Care says it's not currently considering bringing it into the scope of NHS services.
Update brought to you by Simcox Advocates.
A one-off payment of £3,000 shows that Manx police officers are respected, according to the chair of the Isle of Man Police Federation, Barry Hand.
We are very appreciative of the one-off payment being granted. It's a hugely positive gesture from the department and from the government itself. I know that the police officers will be extremely pleased with it. They've worked very hard And it's a good recognition of the difficulties that our constabulary is facing at the moment. It's a start. This is step one, and there is a lot more work to be done around reaching a collaborative agreement with the government about police pay and conditions. We are in parity with police forces in the United Kingdom, so our pay is linked to their pay, so any increases or none affect us here on the Isle of Man as well. I mean, it's a very good reflection on us as a constabulary. It shows that our members and our officers are respected and we are thought highly of. They work very, very hard, and they deserve it. They absolutely deserve this.
Remember to like Manx Radio on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you use Twitter or LinkedIn, make sure you follow Manx Radio, and your Twitter or LinkedIn feed will tell you the moment the update podcast is published and available to listen to. It's usually within 30 minutes of the end of this broadcast. Lifeboat volunteers have been praised for their dedication and professionalism after spending more than 21 hours at sea following a fatal plane crash. Peel and Port St Mary RNLI were part of the emergency services response to the light aircraft collision in Port Erin this week. Here's Tessa Hawley.
Air accident investigators are continuing to help police investigate what happened at Bradder Head at around 1 p.m. on Monday. Police have confirmed the pilot of the Cessna Centurion was killed when their plane crashed into the cliffside. They've not been named. They've also confirmed there was no one else on board. Officers joined the Coast Guard, firefighters, divers and RNLI crews in responding to the incident. Peel Lifeboat helped search for casualties and debris and provided a platform for other emergency services to view the crash site. It was the longest the crew had ever spent at sea, with a personnel change at 11 p.m. and again at 4:30 the next morning so that rest breaks could be taken. The Isle of Man Constabulary has extended its condolences to the pilot's family and says specially trained officers are supporting them as the investigation into what happened continues. However, they say no further information will be released at this stage as they're still working on behalf of the coroner of inquests. The area around Bradder Head remains under police guard and members of the public have been told to stay away from it. The water around the site and the airspace there is also expected to stay closed until Friday, with a ban on people operating drones or flying light aircraft in the vicinity. Anyone who has video footage of what happened has been asked to contact police headquarters.
That's it for Update Tonight, compiled from the resources of Manx Radio's news department. Thanks to newsreader Dave Moore, producer Rhiann Evans. I'm Andy Wint, back with another update tomorrow at 5:30.
WINT